You might be wondering if blocking squares is worth it or if it even works. Or maybe you have no clue what I'm talking about when I say blocking and you want to learn as much as you can about it. If so, stick around because I'll address all of these next.
My name is Brittany and I'm your guide to better crochet and knitting because I believe yarn does more than make pretty things. I craft because it occupies my hands and it calms my mind. I love the process and something pretty is the result. I want that for you too. Here we love yarn, we love to learn, and we truly believe yarn can do more for us than make pretty things.
So let's address the most important question first. Does blocking acrylic squares even work? The short answer is yes, and I think it makes a huge difference to the look of the square. Here I'm working up a mitered square blanket composed of over 200 of these little guys. If I were to leave them as they are and join them together without blocking first, my blanket would turn out pretty uneven. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and well, that would drive me a little crazy. So this is an unblocked square, straight off the hook. This is a blocked square. The difference is pretty incredible, right? It's pretty easy to see why blocking is a good practice to get into. Don't worry, I'll show you how I blocked these squares in just a minute. But first I want to help you decide whether or not blocking is worth it. So to do that, I'm putting these squares to the test. In my eyes, blocking acrylic squares is only worth it if they stay in this position after washing, right? So let's see what happens when I wash this section of squares that were blocked individually. Now sure, this isn't the full blanket, but it's safe to say this section is my little test group. Now a little information about the yarn. This is Paintbox Simply Chunky yarn, which is 100% acrylic, and the label says to wash on gentle cycle and tumble dry on the cool setting, so that's what I'm doing for this little section. While that's going, let's have a look at how I blocked these squares. First and foremost, the purpose of blocking an acrylic crochet square is to make it perfectly square. It basically stretches the stitches and allows them to settle into position. A few things are needed for that process. First, you'll need something to pin the squares to. I use these blocking boards from Hephaestus Crafts, which I purchased on Amazon. Before I bought these, though, I used athletic flooring tiles that I found at a hardware store. The common ground between the two is their foam, which means pins will stick and stay in them. I've heard of others using towels, ironing boards, and various other things around the house, but I can't speak to how they work. These foam mats are cheap, and I've always used them. Next, you'll need a spray bottle with lukewarm tap water. I haven't really found a difference in water temperature, so I just use straight out of the tap and it works great. You'll also need some pins, and to be honest, any type of pin will do. I have a collection of pins with flat heads, but for big projects, they really do start to hurt my fingers, like my fingertips, to push them in. So nowadays, I'm using T-pins. And finally, you'll need some squares. By the way, this pattern is in progress, so keep an eye out for a tutorial on these mitered squares later this fall. For now, any square will do. I want each of these squares to measure 4 inches by 4 inches, and these blocking boards make it easy for me to do that. Each of these little squares is 1 inch. I like to start at the corners, pinning each to the measurement or the shape that you want, then fill in a few pins on the side to straighten out the little bow. Saturate the square with your spray bottle and let it dry overnight. Alternatively, you could dunk them in the sink to get them wet, but I find that to be a tad messier, and the spray bottle works just fine as long as they're soaked. Sometimes I'll even pat it in with my fingers if you need to work it in. That's really all there is to it. Remove your pins only after it's completely dry, that part's really important, and you'll get a perfectly square square. And now the moment you've been waiting for, how does our blocked section look now after washing? Here it is, folks, and the results are a little inconclusive. After blocking each squares individually, joining them, washing, and drying, there's a slight loss of square shape, but overall it still looks pretty good. Now, if you have any experience blocking acrylic squares using this method or another and washing the Afghan after it's been assembled, tell me about it in the comments below. Let's start that conversation so we can help one another find the best way to block our acrylic squares. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of B.Hooked, the the place where we love yarn, we love to learn, and we believe yarn can do more for us than just make pretty things. Subscribe for continued progress, keep an eye out for this mitered square beauty in the fall, and I'll see you in the next one.